Guys, check out the killer record cases and stereo furniture at sidetrackedworkshop.com. Get your vinyl out of the crate and display your records in style. Save 15% with discount code TVG at checkout. That's sidetrackedworkshop.com.
And now, on with the show. Welcome to The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
Well, hello there. Welcome. Episode 454 of the Vinyl Guide podcast? That doesn't sound right. 454. God, gee, man, we are cranking these out. The podcast for record collectors and music nerds. And I hope you all had a nice weekend. I spent much of Sunday spinning and cleaning and re-sleeving some records. Some singles this time. I don't buy too many singles these days, but I've wound up with some pretty serious collectibles I put on Instagram. You could see them there at Vinyl Guide. I recently rehomed them in one of these archival barrier box for singles I got from Bags Unlimited, which I honestly can't recommend highly enough. These boxes hold about 75 singles. They're stackable. They don't crush the records. Great for my purpose. Give a look-see on Instagram. Anyway, it's nice to get my singles sorted. Very therapeutic and nice to get it all done. Anyway, today, dear people, we have two guests, two brothers, the brothers McDonald, Jeff and Steven of Redd Kross, who are celebrating the year of Redd Kross, apparently 2024. Lots of Redd Kross stuff happening. There's a new double album. And you can get the special red transparent version at intheredrecords.com. There's also a new documentary on Redd Kross, Born Innocent, which you can Google the trailer up, and a new tour, which is always great news. More can be seen, had ordered at reddkross.com. That's REDD, cross with a K.com. Now, for those of you new to Redd Kross, let me just say, I absolutely envy you. Discovering Redd Kross is an absolute pleasure. From Neurotica to Phase Shifter, to researching the blues, and the new album is again a wonderful addition to the catalog. But equally as fascinating are their early days, growing up in the punk scene in Los Angeles at ages 12 and 15, being mentored by Black Flag, getting signed to Posh Boy, and releasing a record years before they could legally drive. It's an incredible tale, and we walk through some of the highlights today, including meeting some various Beatles, collecting records, their experiences with police brutality, playing the infamous Pollywog Park show with Black Flag, all the way to modern times. What's happening with the tapes? Will there be remixes of Redd Kross albums? Lots of music nerdery in this one, people. I hope you enjoy. And speaking of which, if you enjoy the Vinyl Guide podcast, we sincerely hope you do. Please follow us in your podcast app of choice, Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you use. There's over 450 episodes of various interviews, discussions, and music jibber jabber with the likes of Joe Bonamassa, episode 453, the executive leadership of Discogs, episode 451, Melvin's partners Buzz Osborne and Toshi Katsai, episode 444, Keith Morris of Circle Jerks and Off, episode 442, Charlie Benante of Anthrax and Pantera, episode 441, Jack Douglas, producer of Aerosmith, John Lennon, and way more, episode 439, John Densmore of The Doors, episode 433, and so many more. All free to enjoy anytime. Just follow us in your podcast app. And you could also get the commercial-free high-resolution and extended versions by becoming a supporter at patreon.com/vinylguide. The choice is yours, and thanks again for your ear time. And with that, let's get on to the Zoom with the brothers McDonald and talk to Jeff and Steven all about Redd Kross. Ladies and gentlemen, this week on the show, very honored to have Jeff and Steven McDonald of Redd Kross celebrating the new record. I guess it's just called the Red Album. Is that right? Redd Kross?
Yeah, that's the nickname, but it's a self-titled album. But since it's Red, we call it the Red Album, REDD, after our name.
Of course. And it's on In the Red Records, which I'm not sure how long, all these forces are combining.
And I will add, well, because it gets a little confusing, because one of my evil plots was to try to rectify the misspelling of our name, which is basically about 50%. So,
God.
so a self-titled album, like, okay, so it's just the title, just the name of the band, and then also the nickname being the Redd Album, and then the fun little insider thing is the Redd Album spelled REDD album. But it's on In the Red, which is RED, which makes it extra confusing, except for on the Obi strip of the vinyl, we actually altered the In the Red label logo. So it says In the Red REDD.
I was going to suggest that would, if that didn't happen, that would have been a missed opportunity.
It happened on the Obi strip. I didn't do it on all.
I didn't even notice that. I didn't know that was the case until this very moment.
He did the layout with John Kropp, and Josh Klinghoffer also was into that idea as well.
And to top it off, you've also got red vinyl. So it's
clear red vinyl. Yeah. Clear red vinyl, which Jeff and I have a special affinity to, because that our copy of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band when we were growing up was on clear red vinyl. It was a strange Japanese import.
Okay. On one of the Odeon ones, I was going to say, yeah, I don't know if
it was on Paramount. Jeff thinks it was printed in Singapore.
I think there were actual bootlegs that they sold on the street from Singapore. They're soft cover too, like look like a large version of a punk single.
So yeah, you guys have clearly thought very deeply on the whole concept, the rhetoric. Now, obviously, it's a nod to Beatles.
Nod to who?
The Eagles.
The Eagles, yes. Don Henley.
The obvious nod to the Eagles.
Have either of you guys ever met a Beatle? Have you worked with a Beatle at all?
I met a Beatle. Have you met a Beatle, Jeff?
I've been in the same room, like only feet. I don't know that that's kind of weird. Okay. My wife's backstory. My wife is, she's Charlotte Caffey from the Go-Go's, and they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame a couple of years ago. And Paul came running up to Charlotte and Jane to talk to them. And so instead of trying to get in there and get a handshake, I decided to film the meeting. And so I would say I met them by proxy. I met Paul by proxy, and I was in the same room as Ringo a couple of times.
I don't remember this. Wait, you bailed on a possible handshake with Paul? Wait, what was that?
Because I had the opportunity. I filmed this without anyone noticing. I could get the audio and video, and it was great because Charlotte was talking about being 12 years old and seeing the Beatles at Dodger Stadium. And Paul was like very sweet. He said, "Oh yeah, I remember you back there." Like a little moment, and I got it on tape.
You were in the colonnade. It's really inappropriate, but I was watching you.
Well, no, you did. I think you did the honorable thing. You captured that moment for your wife, right? You put your own self jumping out of your skin. You put that aside to be able to make that moment, to capture that moment for your wife.
Right. And the thing about it is, like, when I think about people that I really admire on that level, I have nothing to say to Paul McCartney. So, it's not really like I don't really have to meet him and shake his hand. I mean, I would like if I met Bob Dylan, I'd have something to talk to him about. I would ask him questions about, music history. But as far as Paul, I don't want to be just another person who said, "Oh, you're the soundtrack of my life," because, you have to assume as much.
I want to thank you for the music that shaped me. Yeah.
I'm so confused why you would feel that you would have something to say to Dylan and not McCartney.
Bob Dylan's an intense music fan, historian. So me being the music nerd, I would be able to ask him questions that he would probably enjoy answering that weren't even about his music. You know what I'm saying?
But I'm sure Paul's
on that level, on the music geek level, Paul is just, he's burdened with being Paul McCartney his entire life. So, it's like he makes, I just have nothing to say.
Oh, I had a similar experience where I got to find that I did have nothing to say when I met George Harrison.
Oh yeah.
The
That's
late
much better story.
I was way too anxious. I didn't know what to do. But briefly, my George Harrison stories, I had tea with George Harrison, not me personally. I get to sit in on his tea with, once again, association with my wife's family. And and unfortunately, George was quite stressed out around that time. It was right after the intruder had stabbed him a bunch of times. And so, and I got to be in the room for an hour as he told that whole story to 6 people. And it was hair raising. Him and Olivia told the story, but it was weird because he was about how paranoid he was and how every time he walks into a room now, he looks for a weapon wherever he is. Like, what could I use to bludgeon someone with? And the crazy thing was, I didn't know the state he was in. I was beckoned to the house, told that George is here, come. And we picked up Anna's little sister and made an excuse to show up to just kind of barge in. And at the time, I was dressed and looked a lot like John Lennon in the Rock and Roll Circus. I was wearing double denim. I had shoulder length hair parted in the middle. And, and I remember when I walked in the door, he was like looking around like, oh, fuck, who is this?
Where's my weapon?
Exactly. Like, where's the fire poker? We need to hit this guy over the head quick. Any rate, but I sat down and then at the end of the conversation, he engaged me a little bit about music history, actually, Jeff. And I had mentioned the song Downtown for some reason, not the Redd Kross song. It wasn't written yet, the Petula Clark song. And he said, how do you know that Petula Clark song? He was confused how someone in their early 30s would know a song from the mid 60s. And then at the time, Redd Kross was on hiatus and I wasn't feeling like that much of a musician. And what I should have probably said, which might also be a lesson to you, Jeff, should you ever talk to Bob Dylan, was I said, oh, I don't know. I guess I'm a bit of a rock historian. He didn't like that. Rock historian turned him off. But I don't think you get where I'm coming from with Dylan. Dylan's like, it's like a nerd type thing. It's like Petula Clark. It was pretty nerdy.
No, it's a specific type of history, musical history.
And then the only other fun thing I'll say about my meeting with George Harrison was that he was also engaging Anna and I about our personal lives. And at the time we were trying to buy a house and we were dealing with geological reports and it looked like there could be a fault line under our house because they're always very incomplete. And we were a little nervous about it and we were nervous and young. And of course we were nervous. And he said to us, oh yeah, just blow it off. Which we didn't. We didn't follow his advice, and it was the best thing we ever did for our life was to buy that house. So I always like to say that George Harrison gave me bad real estate advice.
Well, we're clear that's not his strength anyway. So now, obviously, Beatles, Beach Boys, being from Hawthorne, big. The one thing I've never heard you guys talk about is Zappa. And Steve, your mustache, your facial hair is kind of reminding me that yeah, exactly. Now, do you guys have an affinity or moments even in the Zappa universe?
Well, only we knew his children.
There's another Hollywood answer for you. But
everyone knows his kids. I don't know. I am still a huge fan of the philosophy of Frank Zappa. I mean, his book and every interview and his take on everything, politics. I couldn't agree with him more on almost everything, except, I like some Frank Sinatra music. I like some Frank Zappa music, but I have never committed to it. I have yet to go there, there's still a chance. Who knows?
With Frank, I would say I love that he gave Alice Cooper a chance and recognized the weirdness of them, and then also
Captain Beefheart and all its cool. Yeah, I mean Zappa was cool as it could be.
But like the sort of jazz fusion-y, tons of notes. It's a lot to take in, and I've never really done it. But he loved he appreciated the Turtles and getting Flo and Eddie to sing with them. And then also working with there's great footage online of him at Bullock Sound in Inglewood working with the Ikeettes, and it's badass. It's amazing stuff.
That's for the Apostrophe album. I guess I know more about Frank Sinatra and Zappa.
But in terms of like being a diehard, Reuben and the Jets fan or so, I don't really know a lot of that stuff. And so I don't know what to say.
All right. Well, fair enough. Look, I think that kind of starts to go into the records that you were exposed to early on. And it sounds like you guys had this amazing record collection from a very young age. What are your first memories of collecting records or getting music into the house?
Well, records were really expensive, like the initial music that both of us listened to, would be like our aunts and uncles who are like, a few years older than us. They had albums. So when we went to visit them, we'd listen to their records, or like our babysitter's record collection. And then when we started buying our own albums, records were like, I think in like early 70s, if you buy like a record from like the local drugstore, it was like $6. So when we finally found a discount record store in our neighborhood, it was $2.99. It was the first time I was able to afford an album actually on my own. One of the first times, and it was David Bowie's Hunky Dory album.
And how did you make that choice, Jeff? Why did you choose? I
was a fan of. I was a childhood fan of David Bowie, but but David Bowie was not famous in America at the time, and people who did know him were like freaked out, and like the kind of hippie people that worked at record stores were really turned off. Like, here I am, like 11 years old, buying Hunky Dory, and the kind of like.
You weren't 11, Jeff. You bought that record like in 1972. You were like 9 years old.
So 9 years old. But the woman, I remember, she kind of looked like a gypsy hippie, and she looked at me like I was trying to purchase pornography. So, like this revisionist history that people have with like Ramones and Bowie and all these things. We had to like eat a lot of shit for many years liking those people before the rest of the mainstream caught on to them.
That's really interesting to me because as a young kid, I imagine, and I think back when I was young, there's a real strong force to assimilate and to try to be normal and to try to be like other people. But it doesn't sound like you guys really had that as much. You were kind of fine to be forging your own path very early on. Is that fair?
Well, the thing about it is music was such a big thing. So like I learned early on, the freakier that like a group is, the better I like them. So it enabled me to stumble into a lot of weird things. I mean, that's how I discovered New York Dolls when I'm, 10, because I was just looking for weird stuff like that. But as far as trying to fit in with people as a kid, as 10, 11-year-old, when I first started buying records and going to concerts, I was trying to be normal. I was trying to fit in, but my musical taste had nothing to do with what other people were into. No, for some reason we were just like we had access to some of the weirdest music available at the time via babysitters and uncles and aunts. So that kind of colored our path.
But I get the point, the way he's driving at, sort of this idea that like you didn't use music as a way to ingratiate yourself with another crowd. It was more, and like you just said, music was such a big thing. I think you meant music was such a big thing to you, and that you were very interested in how it made you feel, what you liked, and you just pursued your own desires with it, your own muse. It wasn't like.
But I used to try to turn kids on at school, like onto the music I liked, until I gave up. I mean, there's two things I remember, like bringing Magical Mystery Tour to kindergarten. We were allowed to bring records, and the teacher had told me, we will not be playing this. And I had no idea what she was talking about, but she seemed very offended. And in 6th grade, I brought Ziggy Stardust to school. 6th grade, and it kind of only one kid got into it, and no one else liked it. But the kid who got into it became, he later became like a big punk rocker and musician later on. So, there you go.
So it's almost like you were a natural contrarian, even early.
I wasn't trying to disagree with people just to disagree with them. It was just like, I always wanted to share the wealth, but it was like a bitter lesson to learn that sometimes like what you believe to be all encompassing, all beautiful, some people just would hate it, and it would be offensive to some. I mean, we grew up in the ages.
Perspective. An early lesson in perspective. Everybody has their own.
The thing is, it's just weird. It's like, I always figured the music I was listening to was so great that all anyone had to do was hear it, that they would agree with me. And, as a child, I thought that. And, sometimes I would have a friend that would agree with me, but but mostly no. I mean, that stuff, the music we listened to in the early days, was just, it just didn't do it. I mean, for the mainstream kids.
I love that idea, though, of thinking like just knowing that you love it so much and thinking like, who couldn't love this? And just thinking that it would be like magic. Like once you present it to someone, they'll be magically intoxicated by it.
Like I was. Exactly.
Yeah. And I still have that sometimes. And it's still baffling to me. And, it's a weird thing.
I gave up on that ages ago. I think the last time I experienced that was like in the old days of touring. We would all have our mixtapes on cassette, and we would be in our van, and we would all take turns playing the tapes that we personally made for and the whole group would have to listen to it. But we were all more open-minded by then, because for the most part, everyone was okay with it. If someone hated a tape someone was playing, it would, we would tell them, and it would be thrown out the window or something. But for the most part, we were open.
You guys have worked together, I mean, lived together, been together all your lives. Is there a musician or an artist, a genre that you guys completely disagree on?
No.
I mean, Jeff's a bigger fan of some things than I am, and probably vice versa. I mean,
but I can find something in any. If you're just going to break it down to genre, I can find something in pretty much any genre that is interesting. But as a whole, maybe not.
I don't think either one of us have ever gotten heavily into jazz.
That's on the horizon.
I always wonder what my entrance point is for that. I have a 15-year-old son that's very adventurous, and that I find to be, in my older years, the best way for me to. It's no longer about, if a trusted friend that I think has got great taste turns me on, so it's more like if it's an en route into bonding with my son, and so, and jazz is an interest to him nowadays. So I'm always like waiting for that moment. And maybe he's going to turn me on to Zappa soon. We'll see.
Well, think about the jazz. I mean, the reason I know that jazz is on the horizon, I like to know a lot of the history of the music I'm listening to. So I know it's such a chore. So I haven't dove into it. But I've loved all the components of jazz my whole life. I've loved noise, avant-garde music, dissonance, all that stuff. I have the ability to appreciate it. So all I have to do is kind of get interested behind, jazz music, and I have to get into the history of it. Then I know I'll be set in my ways, but it hasn't happened yet.
One thing that fascinates me about jazz, and I used to be a bad musician, but a good engineer, and listening. If I listen to maybe contemporary music or rock music or different types of music, I start to automatically break down like, oh, how did they do this? Or, that's an interesting reverb, or that's an interesting chord choice. With jazz, they didn't, especially the old jazz where they just kind of got in the room and played. There's no trickery there, and it's all talent, and it's stuff that's so far above my capacity that I can't even imagine myself picking it apart. And that allows me to be in a different mind state when I listen to jazz. So that's
right.
But I know people who can pick it apart. Like I did go to music school for a little while when Redd Kross went on hiatus in the late 90s. And I had this music teacher who would play what he called tall chords. And those are like these big, like closely coupled together notes with like 9 notes in a chord, and they're jazz chords. And he could name every single note in the chord without looking at it. And that's ultimate ear training. I mean, that's like next level craziness. Luckily,
people are born with that ability.
I mean, clearly you're not burdened with that either. And so it allows you to be, in some levels I'm jealous of it because it seems like it's a superpower, but I get what you're saying. I like that. You're saying you can be truly objective. You're not, you're not getting analytical.
Right. I just don't slip into that state of analysis. Right. And, so maybe I'm glad I grew up close to the power lines.
Well, I think for me right now, I just hear it as a series of mistakes. So I have yet to make sense of it yet.
All right. So getting into early punk rock, and by the way, Stephen, you got a Saints shirt on, which is...
Yeah. We're label mates with the Saints now because
that's right.
In the Red reissued a bunch of their stuff.
Yeah, they got a box set coming out. So getting into punk rock very early on, especially in LA, I think it was I guess fair to say is kind of dangerous back then. When did you guys, was Ramones the entry point to that? Like, how did you start to get on that path? Hey there, all you record nerds. I want to tell you about BagsUnlimited.com. BagsUnlimited.com has a huge selection of vinyl record supplies. Whether you collect LPs, 7-inch singles, 78 shellacs, or anything in between, BagsUnlimited.com will sort you out. From polyline sleeves to cardboard record mailers to 7-inch storage boxes and archive quality record sleeves, protect your records of any size and shape at BagsUnlimited.com. Whether you have a small personal record collection or you're running a massive record shop, you can grab a small supply or even buy in bulk at BagsUnlimited.com. And they've got some really incredible, unique stuff. BagsUnlimited.com even has special size sleeves made especially to protect your box sets, storage boxes and sleeves for cassette tapes, protective supplies for reel-to-reel, and yes, even 8-tracks. Just go to BagsUnlimited.com, click on audio supplies, and prepare to be impressed by all the options they have. That's BagsUnlimited.com. So getting into punk rock very early on, especially in LA, I think it was I guess fair to say is kind of dangerous back then. When did you guys, was Ramones the entry point to that? Like, how did you start to get on that path?
I almost think the Runaways are
the Runaways
first.
Mm-hmm. It was like New York Dolls, Susie Quattro, Mott the Hoople, all that stuff led to the Ramones, all the kind of more like underground music. And then, but when Ramones, their first 3 albums and punk rock in Los Angeles kind of didn't really exist. There wasn't like this violent kind of suburban punk rock thing. It was more of a kind of an arty Hollywood, like there was probably 150 punk rockers in all of Los Angeles during the early days when when like Ramones first came to town and all that stuff. But definitely the Ramones were like they were the return to like rock and roll. It's like if you grew up in the 70s, you knew a lot of music got very fat and bloated, and to hear the Ramones kind of to return to that kind of Meet the Beatles style of music, it was really refreshing and just incredible,
But it's true, there was a danger, but ironically, the danger was the LAPD, and we were and we were present at one of the most infamous riots that kind of that started it all off. It was known as the Elks Lodge riot, and it was St. Patrick's Day, 1979, and it was a benefit concert for a club, the first punk club that had gone under, called The Mask, and the lineup was like it was X and the Alley Cats and help me out here, Jeff. Who was it? The
Go-Go's, Zeros,
and the Wipers.
All the cool LA bands, yeah.
But but the LAPD showed up in full riot squad, and there was nothing going on that required that. And then they stormed in the doors and just started indiscriminately bashing people on the head. It was,
Little girls, even anyone.
I was 12. My parents were out, our parents were outside in the car waiting for us, and they saw it go down. And they were really kind of, it was an eye-opening experience for all of us because no one had ever seen something like it was corruption. It was a harsh corruption because there was no reason for them to do that. And
early punk rockers had a kind of pre-Stay Out of Compton experience with the LAPD for a few years. That was not pleasant.
Okay. Were there other 12 and 13-year-old kids running around, or were you kind of the youngest of the lot?
I was the youngest, and then soon after there were some others, but there were other teenage bands, like the Adolescents were teenagers, and
Social Distortion and
Social Distortion were young. They were Jeff's age, but I was like the little mascot kid for sure. And it was especially weird because we were playing with Black Flag, and those guys were in their mid-20s, and they were like twice my age. And they were boozy and scary and lived in, borderline squats with mushrooms growing out of the rug. And I knew Chuck Tukowski, the bass player, when he used to be called Gary. And then when he started going by the name of Bukowski, I didn't know who he was referencing. I didn't know about Charles Bukowski yet, and so it was a heavy crew to be around. Raymond Pettibone, really awesome guy, amazing artist. Intense guy. And I was 12.
Yeah, they weren't really, they were kind of de facto mentors. We kind of hung out with them, but no one really took the responsibility for us on any level. No one babysat us.
Yeah.
Okay. But they didn't keep an extra eye out just to make
No. I think that they hid certain things from us, though. They were nice enough to do that. I think there was some of the party goods that they may have partaken in at the time were kind of hidden from us. So so they wouldn't go to jail for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, as far as we knew, they were just like beer guzzling dudes, like any suburban dad.
Yeah. So were you guys at the Pollywog Park show?
That was our first like sort of public performance. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you were on the bill of that. What are your recollections of that show?
Our performance was horrifyingly scary because it was in front of like a couple hundred families, very suburban families on a weekend picnic afternoon. And we had only barely played in front of an audience, like maybe never at a venue, never on that level. So it was still very scary to play, but we kind of did it and we got through it, and it was a very exciting achievement for us.
And I've recently seen images of it, and we're like rocking out. We're going for it.
And it was like only like the second time we'd ever played in front of an audience.
Yeah, when the first time went really poorly, we played at an 8th grade graduation party, and the crowd was heckling us and booing us. So, but this crowd was much nicer to us. It didn't turn into a riot until Black Flag hit the stage and Keith was cussing and antagonizing the families and stuff. And then it turned into like people were throwing their picnic baskets at them.
Yeah, stuff. Since it was a picnic, people actually had tomatoes on hand to throw.
Watermelons.
Yeah.
You mentioned Raymond Pettibone, and the first Redd Kross album, the one I think on is it Smoke 7 Records, had Raymond's artwork on the label, I believe. He doesn't loan that. He didn't give his artwork to that many bands. No. How did that come to be for Redd Kross?
Well, I asked him, we were amongst when we were hanging out with those guys early on, there was only 20 of us total. And Raymond was always a really fun person to hang around because he was so bizarre and dark. And he was so prolific as an artist, and I loved his art so much. I just asked him, it was like before he was famous, and he had all these great pop culture, drawings of like Patty Hearst and Joan Crawford and people that we were really into, anyway. So yeah, he said, he gave me a few drawings to choose from. But shortly after that, he didn't Black Flag didn't really want him, you know, they wanted to keep him for themselves, or at least SST.
You mean Black Flag didn't want him peddling his art to other people?
Yeah, I mean, except for Sonic Youth and Off, but yeah, not a lot of people.
He's done a lot of covers now. I mean, Black Flag has no say over what he does now. I mean, he's done a Red Hot Chili Peppers things before, videos and stuff.
Rebel against him.
I mean, he's very mainstream. I mean, that's them. He's slumming it with the Red Hot Chili Peppers now. He's like in the high culture elite,
the Basquiats, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So with those early releases, was there ever any discussion about, because there were other labels, there was SST, there was New Alliance. You were part of that group. Was there ever any discussion of Redd Kross releasing something on either of those labels?
Well, we got signed before Black Flag was really releasing other people's records. We got signed to Posh Boy.
It was one of the very first, second generation record labels in town. So we had a record deal before they did, essentially.
Yeah, we did. Well, they had put out their Nervous Breakdown EP themselves, where they had to pony up the cash, but they weren't signing anybody else. And then we opened for them at the Hong Kong Cafe in downtown LA, and Robbie Fields, who had put out the Beach Boulevard compilation, was there and immediately knew that he wanted to work with us. So, and then we kind of got, teased a little bit, by the Black Flag guys, everything that we were getting, signed or whatever.
But it was pure jealousy.
It was.
Okay. And that the first appearance on record was the Siren compilation, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, as students of records, and you grown up, music is probably the most important thing in your guys' lives. Do you recall the first time having your music on vinyl?
Oh, well, yeah, of course. I think that we were the actual record was delivered to us. We were at the Hong Kong Cafe at some show, and he just brought the records to us. So, like, going home that night, we got to listen to it on our own record player. And Stephen and I, we shared a room, and it was a BSR turntable, like crappy record changer. And it was just amazing. It was amazing to hear your own music coming out of your system.
It's always a mixed bag. I remember I hated the record cover, and we had no say over it.
And we didn't like the other bands on it, but but it didn't last long, because I think the Siren's very rare. Our songs kind of took off locally, and so like it was quickly reissued as a 12-inch EP.
Yeah, so the conversation was like, you guys were the standouts on the record, I assume, and then they decided, well, let's just package it. And the original pressing of that, it didn't even have a cover. It almost looks like a disco kind of 12-inch sleeve.
It's like Robbie got a good deal on some 12-inch sleeves, generic 12-inch sleeves.
Yeah, that was like that first pressing was that we called it the new wave party sleeve or something like that, and then they finally made a jacket for it after that pressing eventually sold out. And then they made the very inspired original Redd album.
Yeah, it's not an album; it's an EP.
But what I loved about that first EP, we had nothing to do with the art at that time. It was like that old log cabin font.
Yeah,
it was
like weird pioneer font.
I mean, Jeff was doing great flyer art around then. It was really like unfortunate that we were not asked to be involved on the art direction, because I think we would have come up with something much cooler than what he came up with.
Later, we would be wholly responsible for it. But like after having no say, and like the first record cover was like the Siren, that green robot face. It was like, where did you get it? Looked like clip art, robot. So bad. And it just kept getting worse and worse. So not until we actually, took the bull by the horns and became our own artists did we start having good album covers.
So you guys were going out at night doing a lot of flyering as well. Was that kind of part of the routine?
Sure.
Yeah, for a brief moment. We stopped doing it when it became extreme. In the mid 80s, when the hair metal thing started mixing with the punk rock, then it became like, didn't bother with it, because you couldn't compete with Bret Michaels. Bret Michaels would be handing out Poison flyers, so it'd be like, there was no need to do this.
Well, it was also just that whole badgering people, Sunset Strip. We weren't, I don't know, the scene kind of changed.
Yeah, we didn't want, well, we never begged people to like come to our shows. We would just be there if they were interested.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. I wanted people, but I don't think I thought it was an effective use of my energy going to the whiskey in 1985 and trying to were you ever in LA around that time? Do you know what, did you know what this scene is I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Metal. It was ridiculous. It was all these people from all over the country trying to break into showbiz, and
they're all moving into town, including Bret Michaels. But
straight from Philadelphia.
It was like that Penelope Spheres movie, Decline of the Western Civilization 2.
Yeah. I got to watch that again. Yeah. That is so hilarious.
Oh, it's classic. we were when that film, when it came out, we were invited to an early screening, and we got to see it with the actual people who were in the film. Well, some of the B and C tier people that were in the film, and it was like, oh my God. Have
they done a Where Are They Now on that?
I don't know. They should. She should definitely make the third version of
where are the members of Odin?
Odin.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, they did. You've seen Heavy Metal Parking Lot, I assume.
Yeah, of course.
And they did a Where Are They Now on that, and they found like the zebra guy and stuff like that. So they should do that.
I loved it.
For Decline. So there's a few records, a few rarities I want to kind of get your thoughts on real quick. In 1984, there was a Redd Kross White Flag single that was unreleased, but there were, as I understand, about 100 copies shared. Ballad of a Love Doll, Pieces of Chris Trent. Do you guys recall this record? And if so, kind of what's your
not until you just brought it up. But that was Bill Bartell, the leader of White Flag, and also he was Gastank Records was his label. So yeah, he had the idea of doing like a rare from the start double A-side single that was the soundtrack for the Desperate Teenage Love Dolls movie before there was an actual soundtrack. But yeah, like it was just for intense collectors, so rare that I forgot that it even exists.
But what was the other side? Pieces of Chris Trent, that what you just said?
Yeah,
I don't think
I had nothing to do with that. But I knew Chris Trent.
I never flipped it over. I feel bad. I've never heard that song, but I know the reference because Chris Trent was an actual person that we used to hang out with in 1979. In fact, Jeff got his first punk rock haircut the same day Chris Trent got his by the same haircutter.
The same beautician who was responsible for the Go-Go's and X hairstyle.
Okay. Yeah. So early on, there was only 100 copies. It was never meant to be more than that, or it wasn't an aborted project that, okay.
I think it was a plain white label, right? And I think each label it was written in Sharpie. Yeah. I don't have it.
Does it command big dollars now? I haven't investigated.
They rarely come up for sale, but probably $400 to $500.
Wow.
God, I should dig in my closet.
Yeah. You got a few of those.
I wonder if Bill stashed a box somewhere.
Of course.
Yeah. Speaking of Gastank Records, Teen Babes from Monsanto, there was the version especial. 250 copies of the record were released, I think, in 2015. That's the only reissue of that album or EP. Why was it such a limited re-release of that? Hey there, I gotta tell you about the Groove Washer. Not because I have to, but because I want to. The Groove Washer is the best record cleaner you can get. And if you have a vinyl collection, you need to keep it clean. Dirt and dust lead to groove wear, which affects the sound and value of your record collection. Use the Groove Washer to clean before each play, and your ears and future pocketbook will thank you. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record store, or go direct to groovewasher.com and use promo code VinylGuide10 at checkout. Groove Washer is a great holiday gift. Why not send one to a friend? groovewasher.com, discount code VINYLGUIDE10. Do it now. Hey there, audiophiles. If you're seeking stylish furniture to showcase your stereo and record collection, well, look no further than SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Sidetracked Workshop designs extraordinarily elegant record cabinets and consoles that add sophistication and panache to your music hobby. Handcrafted in the good old USA in the vinyl-loving city of Portland, Oregon, Sidetracked Workshop's designs are a music lover's dream. Made with real walnut veneered wood and brass accents, these gorgeous designs add class and taste to the record room and ship fully assembled and ready to enjoy. Just check out the designs for yourself at SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Look, you spend thousands of dollars on records. Don't keep them in a crate, and don't risk your records on those feeble wooden pegs from IKEA. Your music deserves the dignity of Sidetracked Workshop. That's SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Elegant solutions for the vinyl lifestyle. Teen Babes from Monsanto, there was the version especial. 250 copies of the record were released, I think, in 2015. That's the only reissue of that album or EP. Why was it such a limited re-release of that?
Well, no, that the original 250 was I put it out myself because I was just into I wanted to design package, and I found some more covers that we had recorded through the years that went really great with that record. We owned it. So there was a 250, but then that was the first batch of reissues, because shortly after that, I changed a couple of the tracks and then put it out again and another edition, and then eventually Merge reissued it. So yeah, it was a record that we owned. You know, we paid for it, and you know, we were able to. You know, it was one of the first ones that we just figured, oh, we can just put this out ourselves, and it was just fun, kind of playing the collector's market. Mm. But the first 250 are the rarest ones.
Well, and also
of them.
I like the name of the record label. It's called Redd Kross Fashion.
I love the label of Gastank, the Casablanca homage.
Right. Yeah, that was Bill. Bill. What his idol was? What's his name? The guy
Neil Bogart.
No, Bill Inglot. I mean, not Bill.
Neil Bogart.
No, but the Kisses manager, Bill Coyne.
Bill Coyne, okay.
And yeah, Neil Bogart. That's where his muses, I guess.
Well, the guy pumping the gas on the Gastanka logo probably looked a lot like the Mustache Man from the Village People as well,
or like an obscure Tom of Finland character.
Do you guys have all the Redd Kross master tapes? Are they all accounted for? Is there anything missing?
I have most of them. Yeah. I recently cleaned out a locker that we had for a long time, because the problem was with those 90s records, like, with major label, and for one song, sometimes there would be like 10 or 12 tapes. It was ridiculous. And so
the 2-inch tapes take up so much real estate.
And then it'd also be like, and you need to make sure they're in like
temperature controlled, and
temperature controlled, and no moisture and all stuff. And so, but eventually stopped paying a bill, and they were going to destroy tapes. Anyways, I got everything, and I have everything digitized now. There was trying to think of what, for a long time I couldn't find Neurotica, and Merge put out another reissue of Neurotica recently, or a couple years ago, and I wanted to find it to remix it, and I finally found the digital version of it I had of the multi-tracks after they had finished. Well,
there you go. There's another reason to put that record out again.
Yeah, so we'll put it out again eventually. Maybe we'll put it on in the Red or something with a better mix. I don't know, but because that was the other thing. I was bummed when Replacements Tim was reissued, and it was also recorded and mixed by the same deceased gentleman who I have great respect for, but I was so jealous because Replacements remixed.
Right.
Tommy Erdelay Ramone He had done their album Tim, and then shortly after did our record Neurotica. Yeah, and then like both records, people have had issues with the recording process, but I'm people who just think that that's what it is.
But you're an engineer also, so you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know. But and I totally get that. And you want to. I actually like a lot of the albums that they're coming out with, remixing with modern sensibilities. I mean, even the Beatles stuff. It's like I don't like re-recording those old things.
No, that's retarded. No. That's wrong.
Yeah,
but
the Beatles stuff is great. If you're like an intense Beatle archaeologist, I mean, of course, it's fun to hear that stuff, but it's not necessary. That's the thing about like all that Giles Martin stuff is really fun, and it hasn't been offensive, and a lot of it's been really fun to listen to, but it was never necessary.
Well,
I would have been fine.
Yeah, maybe you're talking about like the false starts and the alternate takes. I could probably live without those. Those are kind of interesting, but I don't need them on vinyl. I could hear them once and like, oh, okay, they made a mistake on Golden Slumbers, But the original albums now remixed with better fades and things like that. That I don't know. It's to me, it's I get the idea that this is the forever version of it now. 100 years from now, I think so.
Yeah, I don't think they won't start. So they won't keep tampering with the next level.
Yeah, they will, because what'll happen is they'll say, "Oh, it's too bass heavy," and then the bass sounds weird, and they'll have some new way to like replicate the sound that was on the original tape. They'll go back and forth. I think. I mean, there's a Giles argument
or Giles Martin's children will do the next version with the next level of technology.
Yeah, I mean, okay. But if it keeps the Beatles are a really good foundation for musicians coming up today, even so, anything that keeps the Beatles valid and new and fresh for young people, I think it's really important, because they keep music alive, because you can really learn everything there is to learn by listening to those records as a musician, as an artist.
So then, arguably, it is necessary.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, I like them. I enjoy listening to them. I enjoyed the White Album, the new White Album with more bass and
or cool. Just all of it. I mean, like the fact that they were taking those records that were 4 tracks and they were actually able to take somehow get the original performance, even though it had been bounced together with other performances, and then separated into 24 tracks or however many tracks were on there. And then
AI that does it.
It can have complete control over individual instrument balances like a modern record it's magical.
Is that a good thing?
Well, for certain projects.
Right hands, yeah. In the right hands, I think Giles Martin's hands were great for that,
Well, I mean, that was a obviously was passed down to him. He was the person that was, pretty much one of the few people that I would think could do that.
I do like your theory that they're potentially the forever mixes, and that would be great too. But I also like this idea that we're always going to market the Beatles to the next generation, because it's a great story. It's a myth for all of us. And it is not just about the music, but it is the music too, and it's, I don't know, there's an important story being told with it. And
it's history, culture, approach. And, you learn say you're a young musician and you're getting into the Beatles, and then you wonder what turned them on, what were they into? And then it makes you go searching out Little Richard and Elvis. And then you go back further if you're more interested. So it keeps contemporary music alive, I think, non-classical music.
Their ability to peel apart those drum parts, like you said, Steve, they bounced all of Ringo's bits together onto probably one mono track. They now have the technology to peel them apart. What I'm waiting for is someone to do that to raw power. Because
they can do that now.
They can, yeah. And that mix, as was a mistake that it's all kind of on 1 or 2 tracks now. So now we have the power to be able to pull it apart. I'm waiting for someone to really do that.
Well, there was the Iggy remix of Raw Power in the
This is another record though. Okay. I don't like to be the purist here, but I'm going to have to say,
let's hear it. Let's hear it.
You know, like the first, when hearing Raw Power and getting really into that album, when I first heard it, it was like the sound of a migraine headache, but it was like pleasure, but it was pleasurable, but it was like, I couldn't believe what I was hearing, things jetting out, not being able to hear drums that you expect to hear loud, and guitar solos and Iggy screaming. Much later, I mean, it wasn't like a decade later, there was a remix, and I could not deal with it. I could not deal with it. I thought it was
Iggy did a remix
sacrilegious. But the Peter Jackson Raw Power mix would maybe be interesting.
Jackson.
Because even Iggy still had to deal with all the drums being on one or two tracks. They were able to balance it and make it a little bit more bland. But like the idea to be able to take all of those tracks and do something wild with it, that could be really. I'm
an
for
Atmos
that.
version of Raw Power.
Yeah,
it's hard to know if that could happen, because you also have to consider with the Beatles, they were the Beatles, so people in real time knew that every take that they did was worth keeping and doing something, you know. So even though they were bouncing performances together, they were keeping the original performance in a vault somewhere or something, I think. And I think that's partially how they were able to do what they were able to go back and get those original performances, somehow slide them all together and use whatever Peter Jackson.
Well, you know, it's amazing. The Peter Jackson technology, actually, there's been talk about taking like the Star Club, like the Hamburg recordings that are just like really raw, just tape recorder recordings, and pulling those apart and making, you know, and cleaning the noise off those and hearing those in a real world situation, which would be very strange, because would it be reality, or is it, you know, I guess it's alternative reality.
It would have been like the sound of what they would have been like when you were in the room listening. And
so it would have been, it's the idea of the sound of what it would have been like, but not the actual sound.
It would be getting you closer to what that experience was like. And I'll tell you, I've visited the Cavern Club, and I know it's a facsimile. I guess it's like, have you been? What's the name of that street in Liverpool?
Matthew Street.
Have either of you ever been to Matthew Street? Well, there's a great, you can go down to the cellar, and I think the actual cellar that the Beatles played in got filled up or something in the 70s.
It's like next door.
But it's part of that same tract of cellars, and they redid it exactly. And when you walk in there, and I mean, I guess it sounds like nostalgia or whatever, but I mean, it took your breath away. You're like, whoa, you know, you're in that, it was meaningful, and it really gave you a sense of what it was like to be there. And then also as a musician, I can relate to these kinds of places. And so it felt special. And then I was in Liverpool playing music too. So, you know, whatever. I like these things too, for my own reasons, I guess.
Well, especially Beatles related. I mean, again, that seems to be a very deep thread that has woven throughout your guys' lives. So look, let's get back to the new record. The Redd album. I'd love to have you guys on more and talk about this, but I know our time is limited. Are you guys in a constant state of writing? Is it, a double album is a big statement. How did you cull it down? Were there 50 songs that you whittled down to these set records?
Actually, we recorded every song we wrote, essentially, I think. We always do.
We intended on doing like a tight 12-song record, go in the studio with 14 songs, have a couple songs for Japanese B-sides. But then it just went well with Josh, and we were enjoying ourselves, and we realized, oh, wait, we actually have some other songs we didn't do, so why don't we just do those ones too? And if we use that song that we gave to Andrew for the documentary, then that would get us to 18 tracks, which is the same amount of songs on Exile on Main Street. And that's a legitimate double record. So we didn't have to have 30 songs of half-finished tracks.
We've never done that. It's like, I don't waste my time if something is not working out. We don't have spare songs, spare parts. Yes.
What do you mean? Sure, songs. You have spare parts. We did some searching for your spare parts.
But I always, when I would sit down and write, I would write a part and just leave it, forget it, and then stumble upon it 10 years later.
Or bring it to your little brother, and say, do something with this.
but we never wrote like a lot of extra songs. That's another thing. The problem with CDs, I didn't like bonus tracks because I think they throw off the artist's intent. It's like you have the subpar tracks on. That's fun for the fan, but it's not what the artist intended. So I like to, I think we kind of just did everything that we thought worked together.
Do you still think, like, especially when sequencing a record, you think of Act 1, Act 2, Side A, Side B, how they flow together? Yeah. Like, how in depth do you guys go? Do you even like debate, argue about it?
Oh totally.
Yeah, a major argument.
We had some debates on this, but I think Stephen and I, our sequences were much closer than our producers. Our producer had a much wilder sequence plan. But yeah, I think of it like a play or a movie, even though people rarely listen to albums as a whole experience. I grew up listening to it, so I always want to at least give it that as an option.
Yeah, I guess I've always recognized Redd Kross as an album band. Like it seemed that you guys didn't really think in terms of singles. Not that you didn't release them, but I think you guys were always thinking of a larger body of work than just a 3-minute in there and out of there.
Right. Well, we always took it song for song, but record albums, I always prided the fact that most of our records were anywhere from 29 to 33 minutes. They were just like exactly the same length as a Byrds album or something. I could, our albums like were baffling to me. But this record here, even though it's an hour album, it's a double record set, I think that it's kind of broken up into the proper pieces, So it is a fun experience.
It ended up really varied. I think it's a pleasureful listen. Like I think there's enough. It's not, there's not like a salsa and then a reggae jam. We're not trying to like please everybody, but at the same time, just within the parameters that interest us, it has a lot of different dynamics, mood, tempos, sounds that I think, for the listener, it won't become tedious.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've got the digital files. The album sounds fantastic. And the one thing I've always noticed about Redd Kross albums is, it doesn't get derivative. Each one kind of goes somewhere further. And this album, even further in a deeper creative space. And the fact that it's 2 albums and you don't get tired of it is, testament to, I think this is a big statement for the band.
Thank you.
And so I can't wait to get my Red Clear vinyl, which should hopefully be delivered soon. Guys, and I want to be respectful of your time. I'm going to start wrapping up. Is there anything you want to talk about we haven't talked about?
Well, I really miss Australia, so I'm hoping we'll see you in person.
Now, are you in Australia?
I am. I go back and forth between California and Australia, but I live here permanently.
Because I wasn't sure which Australian state your accent was from.
Oh, yeah, Santa Cruz. That's the...
that makes sense.
Okay. All right, gentlemen. Well, again, I want to make sure everyone knows Redd Kross, or what's being termed as the Red Album, is available now. Redd Kross is also announcing quite a big tour. Hopefully, Australia will be in those dates at some time soon. Nothing announced yet, but yeah, we got our fingers crossed. Hopefully, we'll see you guys shortly. And guys, I'd love to have you back on to talk more record nerd stuff. And again, great record. Thanks for coming on the Vinyl Guide.
Thanks for having us.
So much.
What I really enjoyed most about that interview is just hearing them both interact and go back and forth, and just hearing them do that. 2 brothers being so close. It's almost like they communicate like twins, right? But it is really beautiful to see, and so glad to see them continuing to work together and put out great music after so many years. The Redd album, or just simply Redd Kross, available at inthereddrecords.com. And of course, the tour and the trailer for the Born Innocent documentary are available at reddkross.com. And that's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Huge thank you to those of you who are leaving us positive reviews on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Always appreciated. And to those of you who are sharing on social media, Facebook and Twitter and inside Reddit and Facebook groups and that sort of thing, that is hugely appreciated. A big mwah goes out to you. And we'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, get out there and buy some records, people. Cheers.